quiet village of Ugu, nestled among vast green fields and towering trees, lived a man named Dike. He was a hardworking farmer, well known in the village for his skill in cultivation and his dedication to family. Having grown up as the only child of his widowed mother, Dike always dreamed of having a large family, especially sons, to ensure that his name would continue to be respected for generations to come. His marriage to Neka, a woman of extraordinary beauty and grace, was a blessing. Neka was not only loved for her kindness, but also for her ability to care for the home and her husband. Yet, despite the harmony in their married life, Dike's heart yearned for more, a son. He would often say to Neka, "A family is not complete without a son to carry on my name and our traditions." Neka would smile softly, understanding how much her husband cared about this. She too longed for children and prayed every day that she would be blessed with a pregnancy. However, despite her daily prayers and secret rituals, the pregnancy took longer than expected. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight bathed the small village, Neka woke up feeling nauseous. The sensation of dizziness was so intense that she had to sit down immediately. Her body trembled, and she felt feverish. Dike, seeing his wife in such a state, became worried and rushed out of their hut to call his mother, who lived in a small hut next door. "Mama, come quickly, Neka is unwell," Dike shouted, panic clear in his voice. Dike's mother, an elderly woman with the wisdom of age, hurried over without hesitation. When she entered the hut, she found Neka sitting on the bed, pale and trembling. With her usual calmness, the elderly woman approached the young wife and placed a hand on her forehead. Then, with an experienced gesture, she gently pressed Neka's lower abdomen. In that moment, Dike's mother had a sudden realization. Her eyes lit up, and with a joyful cry, she exclaimed, "Chinik dalu o." Thank God. Neka, although weak, looked up with curiosity and surprise. "Mama, what's going on?" she asked with a trembling voice. "My daughter," Dike's mother responded, her face glowing with joy, "you're pregnant." The news hit Dike like a bolt of lightning. His eyes widened, and without hesitation, he grabbed his mother in a joyful embrace. "Mama, finally, I will be the father of a son," he cried, his voice filled with euphoria. He turned to Neka, who was still trying to process the magnitude of the news. With great affection, Dike approached his wife and kissed her forehead. "Ada, my love, you have given me the greatest happiness. I will have a son, a strong boy who will carry on my name. I am the happiest man on earth." From that day on, Dike's life changed completely. He worked with even more dedication in his fields, ensuring that every crop was perfect. From that day on, Dike's life changed completely. He worked with even more dedication in his fields, ensuring that every crop was perfect. Every morning, he woke up before dawn, heading to the fields with boundless energy, telling his apprentices how he would soon become the father of an heir. Meanwhile, at home, Neka was treated like a queen. Dike didn't allow her to do any work. "You mustn't lift a finger," he would tell her every day. "Our priority now is your rest and the healthy growth of our child." Dike's mother prepared delicious meals every day, making sure Neka ate only the most nutritious foods. She often cooked traditional dishes like ogbono soup and pounded yam, knowing how much Neka loved them. "My daughter, you must be strong for the baby," she said as she served the food with affection. Although weak, Neka was deeply touched by the love and care of her husband and mother-in-law. Despite the difficulties of pregnancy, she felt blessed. Each time Dike returned from the fields, he brought her small gifts, beads, fine fabrics, or simply flowers he had picked along the way. The days passed slowly, but they were filled with hope and joy. However, one hot afternoon, when the sun was high in the sky and the air was thick with humidity, Neka began to feel sharp pains in her lower back. At first, she thought they were just normal pregnancy pains, but soon the pains became more intense, stronger, until she could no longer ignore them. "Mama," she called out in a weak but pained voice. Dike's mother rushed to her side immediately. "What's wrong, my daughter?" she asked, concerned. When Neka explained the pain, Dike's mother knew that the time had come. She ordered the neighbors to fetch the village midwife, while she tried to comfort Neka. Dike, hearing the commotion from his fields, ran home with his heart pounding. "The time has come," he thought excitedly. "Soon I will be a father." When he arrived, the midwife was already there, and the village women had gathered around the hut to offer their support. The labor was long and painful. The hours seemed to pass slowly as Neka's cries mixed with the sounds of nature outside the hut. Dike waited outside, his heart full of anticipation, pacing nervously back and forth. "Soon, my heir will be here," he kept telling himself. Finally, after many hours of waiting, the cry of a newborn baby filled the air. Dike smiled, his heart racing. He couldn't wait to hold his son in his arms. When the midwife emerged from the hut, with a gentle smile on her face, Dike rushed toward her. "How's my son?" he asked before she could even speak. But the midwife, with a kind expression, responded, "It's a beautiful baby girl." Dike's world crumbled in an instant. All his happiness and hope disappeared like dust in the wind. "A daughter," he shouted in disbelief. "I wanted a son. A strong man to carry on my name." His anger grew rapidly. Without another word, he stormed into the hut, finding Neka lying there, exhausted but smiling with relief as she cradled their newborn daughter. With fury in his eyes, Dike shouted, "If you value your life, leave my house." "No!" Neka, shocked and heartbroken, tried to hold back tears as she clung to her baby. The neighbors, hearing the commotion, gathered outside the hut and tried to calm Dike. "It's just a newborn. How can it be Neka's fault?" they said. With fury in his eyes, Dike shouted, "If you value your life, leave my house." "No!" Even the village chief was called in, and after long pleadings, Dike agreed to let Neka stay, but with a cruel condition: "You may stay, but you will sleep in the animal shed. You are not worthy of staying in my house." That night, as the rain poured down heavily, Neka found refuge in the animal shed, clutching her newborn baby to her chest. Sitting among the goats and cows, Neka spoke softly to her daughter, trying to console her, even though she herself felt shattered. "I will call you Chinaza," she whispered, "because I know that one day God will answer our prayers. Chinaza, my strength, you will be my hope." The months that followed were filled with suffering for Neka. Abandoned by Dike and relegated to live among the animals, she had to find the strength to care for her baby. She started doing small jobs around the village, selling food and goods she grew with her hands. Despite her poverty, Neka refused to give up. Every morning, she woke up at dawn to work and ensure that her little Chinaza had everything she needed. Meanwhile, Dike continued his life with his new wife, Abua, who soon became pregnant. Dike's joy was boundless. When Abua gave birth to twin boys, Chucks and Chuka, Dike rejoiced. "Finally, I have real sons," he shouted through the village, mocking Neka and Chinaza at every opportunity. "That cursed woman gave me a daughter, but now I have 2 sons to carry on my name." Chinaza grew up amidst these difficulties, but she inherited her mother's same resilience and determination. While other children played, Chinaza studied. Neka made incredible sacrifices to ensure her daughter received an education, believing that only through knowledge could Chinaza break free from the cycle of suffering. The years passed, and Chinaza blossomed into a brilliant and determined young woman. She succeeded in gaining admission to the university, a piece of news that brought great joy to Neka. But when Chinaza approached her father to share her success, she found only disdain. "Papa," Chinaza said with a hopeful smile, "I've been accepted into the university. Soon, I'll be a lawyer." But Dike, without even looking at her, responded harshly, "University? How dare you boast in front of me? My twins, my real sons, haven't even finished school, and you have the audacity to talk about university." Chinaza, hurt but not discouraged, bowed her head and walked away. She knew that despite her father's hatred, she would continue her path. And so it was, with the support of her mother and her incredible willpower, Chinaza graduated with honors. She became a respected lawyer, known not only in her village but throughout the region for her intelligence, courage, and integrity. While Chinaza's fame and success grew, Dike's family began to fall apart. His twin sons, Chucks and Chuka, despite all the privileges they had received, took a dark path. They joined criminal gangs in the village and became notorious for their illegal activities. They stole, cheated, and brought shame to their family. Dike, who had once boasted about his sons being his greatest success, now faced disgrace and dishonor. Neighbors who once praised him now avoided him, whispering behind his back. One day, the village of Ugu organized a grand ceremony to honor Chinaza. The news of her success had spread far, and local authorities wanted to publicly recognize her as a role model for the community. Dike, now old and bitter, watched from a distance, unable to hide his shame for how he had treated the daughter who was now celebrated as a hero. Chinaza stepped onto the stage, with Nneka by her side. As the audience applauded, Chinaza took the microphone and, with a steady voice full of emotion, said, "Everything I am, I owe to my mother. She has been my strength, my refuge, my inspiration. No matter how difficult our life was, she never stopped believing in me. Today, I am here because of her." Chinaza's words deeply touched everyone present. Even Dike, who had remained in the shadows, couldn't hold back his tears. He finally realized the great mistake he had made in rejecting a daughter who had surpassed every expectation, while the sons he had so desired had become his greatest disappointment. He finally realized the great mistake he had made in rejecting a daughter who had surpassed every expectation, while the sons he had so desired had become his greatest disappointment. Chinaza, with the noble heart she had inherited from her mother, looked at her father and responded, "It is never too late for forgiveness, Papa." Despite all the pain and hardships, they had won. Love, determination, and faith in God had carried them beyond every obstacle. In the years that followed, Chinaza became a prominent figure not only in the village of Ugu, but throughout the region. She became a lawyer for the weak and disadvantaged, protecting the rights of those who could not defend themselves. Nneka lived out her final years in peace, knowing that the sacrifice she had made for her daughter had not been in vain. Dike, on the other hand, spent the rest of his life in remorse, trying to make amends for his mistakes. His twin sons, Chucks and Chuka, ended up in prison for their crimes, bringing further disgrace to the family. The story of Chinaza became a legend in the village of Ugu, the daughter whom the father had rejected, but who ultimately saved the family's name and restored dignity to her mother. The story of Chinaza became a legend in the village of Ugu, the daughter whom the father had rejected, but who ultimately saved the family's name and restored dignity to her mother. The story of Chinaza became a legend in the village of Ugu, the daughter whom the father had rejected, but who ultimately saved the family's name and restored dignity to her mother. The story of Chinaza, a daughter's triumph, underscores a fundamental lesson. The value of a child is not determined by their gender, but by their character, abilities, and potential. Both male and female children deserve equal rights and opportunities, and societies that fail to recognize this can suffer from the consequences of their biases. Throughout the story, Dike's obsession with having a male heir blinds him to the potential of his daughter, Chinaza. He, like many in patriarchal societies, equates masculinity with strength, leadership, and success, assuming that only a son can bring honor to the family. This belief is not only flawed but harmful, as it underestimates the value women can bring. In reality, Chinaza becomes the family's pride and savior, illustrating that a person's worth is determined by their talents, drive, and values, not their gender. The story of Chinaza, a daughter's triumph, underscores a fundamental lesson. The value of a child is not determined by their gender, but by their character, abilities, and potential. Both male and female children deserve equal rights and opportunities, and societies that fail to recognize this can suffer from the consequences of their biases. In the story, Nneka makes sacrifices to ensure that her daughter receives an education despite the lack of support from her father. The opportunity Chinaza receives transforms her into a successful and respected lawyer. This shows that when girls are given the same opportunities as boys, whether in education, career, or leadership, they are just as capable of excelling. Denying women these opportunities based on gender stifles not only their potential, but the overall progress of society. The story of Chinaza, a daughter's triumph, underscores a fundamental lesson. The value of a child is not determined by their gender, but by their character, abilities, and potential. Both male and female children deserve equal rights and opportunities, and societies that fail to recognize this can suffer from the consequences of their biases. Dike's rejection of his daughter Chinaza in favor of his twin sons, Chuks and Chuka, highlights how gender biases can lead to poor decisions. While Dike places all his hopes in his sons, they bring nothing but disgrace to the family. By the end of the story, it is clear that his unfair treatment of Chinaza led to unnecessary hardship for both her and her mother. These biases weaken family bonds and limit the potential of individuals. A society that upholds gender equality, on the other hand, promotes stronger, healthier, and more balanced communities. The story of Chinaza, a daughter's triumph, underscores a fundamental lesson. The value of a child is not determined by their gender, but by their character, abilities, and potential. Both male and female children deserve equal rights and opportunities, and societies that fail to recognize this can suffer from the consequences of their biases. The family is the foundation of society, and the values instilled in children shape future generations. Dike's preference for sons over daughters reflects a wider societal issue, but the story also shows how families can be agents of change. Nneka's quiet but unwavering belief in her daughter, despite the rejection they faced, is a powerful example of how nurturing and supporting children regardless of their gender can break cycles of discrimination. When families treat both male and female children equally, they foster environments where everyone can thrive. The story of Chinaza, a daughter's triumph, underscores a fundamental lesson. The value of a child is not determined by their gender, but by their character, abilities, and potential. Both male and female children deserve equal rights and opportunities, and societies that fail to recognize this can suffer from the consequences of their biases.